There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another tag. This is the very first tag that Roz of Scally Daddling About the Books has created, and she tagged me on it. It's the Reread Book Tag, the 2020 version. I did a tag like this that was created by just one reader a few years ago. So anyway, I hope I have something new and interesting to say this time. So thank you very much for tagging me, Roz. I love Roz's channel. If you haven't checked it out, you must. And I have a couple different Zoom chats with her coming to my channel. Stay tuned. I'm going to read you the prompts, and then I'm just going to kind of do a little monologue about that was going to cover hopefully most of these points. So one is, let's assume you do reread if you're doing this tag. So where do you sit on the rereading scale from almost never to all this time? 2, has that changed over your reading life? 3, when do you reread? Maybe immediately after finishing a book, or not till years later, or when the mood strikes? 4, why do you reread? 5, how? Faster, slower, just the best bits? 6, who or what do you reread more specifically? Which authors, genres, or books? 7, is there a book that you found better when you reread it? 8, one that was worse? 9, which one book have you reread the most? I don't reread a lot, but on an average, I started rereading a little bit in the last 5 years, like 2, 3, 4 books a year that are rereads, and I do track them when I remember. I have a separate shelf on my Goodreads for rereads. I used to never reread unless it was for school, university, and recently I have started rereading, but usually after a few years has passed since my previous reread. Why? Usually because I don't really remember it. I think because of slow reading and various other reasons, I have retained a lot more of what I've read in the last 3 or 4 years compared to the way that I forgot most of what I read decades ago, or even 10 years ago. I'm not sure if I'm going to remember the books that I'm reading now in 10 years, but I think I'm going to retain them more than I have retained stuff that I read a decade or longer ago. So part of what makes me want to reread is just to re-experience it, to see do I still like it, to re-immerse myself in it, because I think I didn't give it my best attention at the time. So all of those reasons. Yeah. When I reread a book, I read it from cover to cover, and I probably take more time, slow down, read it in my newfound slow readerly fashion because I want to experience it more deeply. Books that I've reread in the last few years that I remember, one was Annie Proulx's The Shipping News, which I loved, read it about 20 years ago, and I reread it about 3 or 4 years ago and loved it even more, and had remembered almost nothing about it from the first read, but loved it as much, if not more, on the second reread. And that was the reread that kind of launched me into being a little bit more of a rereader than I had been. In terms of the ones I've reread the most, it's probably Pride and Prejudice, which I think I've reread 3.5 times. Almost all of that for school, but recently I had a private student that wanted lessons. She wanted me to teach her Pride and Prejudice here in Japan to improve her conversational skills, which didn't make sense to me because you're not going to learn how to have a conversation in 2020 in English by reading Pride and Prejudice. But anyway, we had a few lessons and she quit, so I guess she realized she wasn't learning modern conversational English, or I wasn't the teacher for her, whatever, but I reread half of it for that. Wuthering Heights I've read at least 3 times. Most recently, I think it was last year for Victober. I love it more every time I reread it. And another book that I have read and then reread in the last 5 years. Like I read it for the first time maybe 5 years ago, and then I reread it 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and that was A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. It's a novella, 100 pages, 150 pages, that just speaks to me so deeply, and I think I wrote in my original Goodreads review, and I would say the same thing today. It says really all there is to say about love, life, sex, death, all the big topics in literature. It's just compressed into a novel set in the years immediately following World War I, where a former soldier who has PTSD, and his wife has left him, and he is a art restorer, and he's hired to go leave London and go to this rinky-dink little town and uncover a painting, a mural that had been covered over in the church 800 years before because the priest at that time thought it was immoral or something. And so he's been hired in 1919 or 1920 to scrape all the stuff off and restore it. And it's how his interactions with the people in this very strange little town that just car bursts through into the universal in a way that's just gorgeous. So I'm going to reread it probably again next year because it's that good. I have very recently finished the last Barbara Pym novel, and I've been reading her novels in publication order for about 4 years, and I've finished them, and next year I will start them all over again in publication order, and I will be rereading Barbara Pym for the rest of my life. In terms of what's been better, I haven't had an experience where one was worse. I think most of them have been better. I have not reread a book that I didn't care for yet, so I've only reread books that I liked or loved, and they've all been as good or better. The only book that I remember really yearning to reread as soon as I finished it was Louise Erdrich's The Plague of Doves. Greg of Supposedly Fun's favorite book. I read it on his recommendation, and I loved it almost as much as he did. I loved it so much, 5 stars. And it was so intricately plotted that I realized that I didn't catch everything, and I wanted to immediately start it over again. I didn't, but I will be rereading this one soon. As I said, sometimes I want to reread something because I didn't think that I gave it my full attention. So one like that is Lawrence Durrell's Justine, which I did as a buddy read with Adam of Memento Mori, just as the pandemic was overwhelming all of us around the globe, and I was not sleeping well, and I was not able to really focus on reading, and it was a real struggle to read it, yet I still loved it, but I realized that it was a subpar reading. So before I move on to the next volume in that Alexandria quartet, I will reread Justine first, because my first reading didn't do it justice. That's what I have to say about rereading. Thank you again to Roz of Scally-Daddling About the Books for the tag, and I'm going to tag the following people: Jyotsna of Jyotsna's Bookscapade, Kim of KDBooks, and sorry, I don't know, I haven't taken the time to check to see if any of these people have already done it, but if you haven't, please do it. Kim of KDBooks, Freddie of Sluggish Reader, Courtney Ferriter, Alba of Seriela, Kieran of KDBooks, and Greg of Supposedly Fun. And anybody else out there who hasn't yet done it. It's a great tag. You should do it. And don't forget to check out Roz's channel. I love it. Thanks for watching.